I grew up here, being surrounded by adults who share their faith with me and let me witness how God works in their lives. As a child here, I was taught stories about Jesus, told about how much he loves me, and that one day I would have to decide for myself if God was real and for me to ask him into my life forever. I went through the New Believer class with Scott and Tara Riggins to put my spirituality on track towards baptism. Near the end of the classes, I finally decided that it was time for me to ask God into my heart because I thought I knew all I could about God. And for my 12-year-old self, I did. The almost teen Emily was so in love with Christ and ready to fulfill the life goals that he had for me. After my baptism, nothing really seemed to progress. Don't get me wrong, I still loved God and had him in my heart, but just felt a little stagnant. Every year, the youth group goes to a summer camp, and we join together with other churches from other states and cities for about a week. Each summer pretty much runs the same way, with communal meals, small group Bible studies, group games, and worship. All of these activities are fun, exciting, a great way to meet new people, but my favorite part is coming together, whether in a small group or a big, large church family. But my favorite part is worshiping. On the last night of camp, we usually have a South Main only intimate Bible session, which is more intimate and allows us to evaluate what we have learned throughout the week and reflect on our relationships individually with Christ. One particular night, about 4 years ago, I specifically remember being changed in my faith. 4 years ago in DeLand, Florida, I remember, after a really emotional night of everyone talking, I felt compelled to talk to someone and ask questions about my faith. So I pulled one of our parent chaperones and close family friend, Susan Moore, to the side and asked her if I could ask her some questions to talk about my faith. After she agreed, we went and found a quiet place for me to ask my questions. I was nervous to start asking questions because I hadn't asked these questions before to anyone. Some questions I asked, like, how do we know the stories in the Bible are all true? What is the proof that all of these miraculous events actually happened? What about seeing God in everyday life? Are we supposed to have at least one amazing story to tell? And how will I know that God is always present in my life? After going through most of my questions, I already began to feel a lot better just getting them off my chest. Susan was a great listener and assured me that I was not the first to ask these questions. After talking with her for about 20 minutes, I began to feel better and realized that I was just growing in my faith. Susan did a wonderful job of consoling me, and I will never forget her kindness and love to watch me grow. Acts 2:42 says, "They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer." The church in the book of Acts kept on devoting themselves to learning, to caring for one another, to worship, and to prayer. They did not just think that just because they heard it one time, they knew all they could about God, like I did when I was 12. They knew that there's more of God to learn. Their faith always needed to grow with them. After growing together and learning, people in this church sold their possessions and gave them to anyone who needed them. Their care shows the comfort and stability we have in the love of Christ and how much it can change our lives. Talking to Susan that night at camp helped me in a similar way. I realized that even though God received my nearly 13-year-old faith, there was more of God to learn. That just as God received my teenage camp questions, there's more of God to know. It is comforting to me to know both that my faith is real and matters every day, and that there's more to learn, more to grow into, more of God for me. Even though it took into my youth years to realize this truth about God, I would not change my faith progression one bit. I'm not a child anymore in my feelings toward God. I am maturing both physically and spiritually. This process of maturation is very exciting, And I will still continue to have questions about all my life, but I know now to trust in God and know that he has big plans for me. When I go off to college next fall, I plan to find a church that helps my faith like South Main has. I look forward to finding the perfect version of South Main in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, that I can. A place that will love me and let me ask questions and grow even while I serve. Not only has South Main helped my faith, it has shown me how to grow as a person with people who love me and love God.
It's as hard as it looks. That was good. I liked it. We did the same Bible verse, so if you notice similarities in the sermons, just shout them to me. It'll be a much more exciting sermon that one. All right, let me get a little intro. It's Evian. The last 4 years of my life have been spent at St. Thomas High School. At first, I thought St. Thomas was going to be a shoo-in for me, but my first real taste of how much of an outsider I was brought to my attention on the feast of St. Thomas Aquinas. And for those of you who haven't been to a mass or experienced anything like that, it's not a feast. It's you get a little wafer and some wine. Not a feast. You feast spiritually. It fills you up that way. On that day, the entire school came to the auditorium and we had Mass. This was my first experience with a Roman Catholic Mass. It didn't go very well, just to be honest. In Acts 2:42 through 44, Luke writes, "They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to the fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe, and many wonders and miraculous signs were done by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common." This could be easily compared to the all-school masses at St. Thomas. It must be great for the fellowship of believers, but I did not have everything in common with these believers. I was like the new guy who was sort of half of a believer. I stood and pretended to know the words to the Hail Mary, the profession of faith, the Gloria, the Eucharistic prayer, the memorial acclamation, and was completely confused when the priest asked everyone to give peace to one another. The priests also like to use incense during the Mass, but to be honest, it smells like burnt hair. I noticed very quickly that in the Lord's Prayer, I was adding too many words towards the end. It's a no-no. The Catholic Lord's Prayer leaves, "For thy kingdom come, and the power and the glory forever." And I was aware of this little omission. So I proceeded to the "and the power" part, and I realized that I was the only one speaking. And one of the more confusing parts to the Mass was when it was time for Eucharist, or a snack time, or communion, whatever you want to call it. And I went up to the priest who was distributing the blood and the body of Christ, and I didn't know how to approach him, so it was really awkward for me. And he said, "My son, are you Catholic?" I was like, "No, Father, I'm not." He's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, you can't partake in the Eucharist." So I awkwardly walked back to my chair with an empty stomach. And some find St. Thomas a great place for a family of faith, and that's amazing for them, good for them. As of yesterday, I am an alumnus of St. Thomas High School. When I was throwing my cap up in the air, I realized the culture that I absorbed at St. Thomas. And it's unlike any other. I think St. Thomas is an outstanding school where I grew in my education and as a man. And I developed brothers, and I still cherish my experience there. But my fellowship of believers is here at South Bend Baptist Church.